Welcome to Knuckle Busters. In Season 1, we're going to build a capable track car for both drift and grip. But first, let's explain what this show is. We had a few cars in mind for this build: an S197 Mustang, an S13, or a 3 Series BMW. All these are capable cars, but we chose the E36 M3.
So when we pulled up, we immediately noticed that this car had a ton of issues.
Twist it a little forward. Don't twist it back.
Quirks.
That little piece.
After the test drive, most people would have just tossed the owner the keys back and drove away. But we decided we actually wanted this thing. Because it was so cheap, there was actually a ton of people interested in coming to take a look, so the owner was pretty firm on his price. But we managed to get him down to $2,200.
I can't! How am I supposed to?
So we got the car back to the shop, but it's a bit different than the last time we've seen it. It's been beat on, it's been stripped down, and it's been caged. But we're not going to talk about that right now. What I want to talk about is how we're going to power this thing. What kind of engine's going to go in it? So we wanted to build a reliable, powerful track car. Gave us two options. We either keep the S50 or throw in a more powerful LS1.
Why don't you like S50s? Because you really don't like BMW engines.
I really don't, because it's harder to, it's a lot harder to work on. Yeah, f this engine. I don't like working on them because it's a really tight space, like it's really long block. It's really hard to get to the headers. The intake manifold's kind of a mess. The wiring's also a mess. It's just not worth it. Anything aftermarket for this is going to be way too expensive to get the power numbers that we want for a car like this. This will have to have some kind of crazy forced induction, which will require a lot more money than building an LS1. You can get parts anywhere. They're way cheaper. There's big aftermarket support. So we went with a more powerful, more reliable LS1. Physically, yeah, they are easier to work on. I mean, everything is right in front of you. It's really accessible. Plus, there's just so much aftermarket support, and it changes so dramatically. You know, you have it in a truck or a van or a Camaro, and we actually pulled this from a Camaro. So this is obviously not ready to go into the M3. It's old, it's tired, it needs a freshen up. And I'm not an engine builder, I'm not comfortable with that stuff. So Vin's gonna take it to our friends at Edelbrock to get this thing built.
Yo, pull in here. 2 Choco Tacos, stat. So the LS1 out of our Camaro is pretty beat, it's tired, has a ton of mileage on it, and it's not quite at the power level we'd like it to be at. So we came to Edelbrock, where we're gonna do a whole bottom end refresh and throw a new top end kit on it. So new cylinder heads, cam, and then top it off with their new cross ram intake manifold. So, as you guys probably figured out, we're building an LS. Our buddy Troy's been helping us out with this build. Since 1955, people have been putting the small block Chevy in other chassis.
Yeah, it's such a unique design, and it's so easy to make power out of them. It's inexpensive too, they're readily available. It's just a no-brainer to use an LS.
We bought a donor car. It had a ton of mileage on it, like nearly 200,000 miles on it. So we know it needed a refresh. We also wanted to boost the power up a little bit. So we're doing heads, cams, intake, you know, all that. Our buddy Troy took this thing apart, discovered a couple of issues. Somehow water got into one of the cylinders and ate the cylinder wall a bit, and then you found some other issues with it as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, it looked like the sleeves were separating from the block. There's a crack in the block. You know, even though that happened, the thing still ran great. That's a testament to the LS platform.
Yeah, and we picked an aluminum block because we want to be really sensitive to the weight distribution of the car. So, you know, while some people want to go out and do iron blocks for different applications, we wanted to stick to the aluminum. So, most cost-effective tactic to get this fixed was to buy a new block, and luckily Troy over here was able to source a block for relatively cheap, actually cheaper than repairing this.
Yeah, our guys at Scoggin Dickey in Texas, they're a great GM performance dealer. They hooked us up with a new block, a fully rebuild kit for the LS1. They really hooked it up.
So when we reached out to Edelbrock, we said that we wanted to make about 400 to 450 wheel horsepower out of the car while keeping it naturally aspirated. So, you know, we kind of leaned on Troy a little bit to guide us in the right direction of how to get there. What are we working with on the bottom end now?
Well, the bottom end, we got a brand new GM crankshaft. The guys at Scat hooked us up with some forged rods. And also with the rebuild kit that we got from Scoggin Dickey, came forged pistons and all the gaskets needed to rebuild this thing.
Again, although we weren't looking to build a bottom end, you know, we're still walking out with a better engine. So our main focus was to actually come here and do the heads, cam, and intake manifold. You guys have a new CNC ported LS1 to LS3 cylinder head.
Yeah.
It's an LS3 head for an LS1 essentially, right?
Exactly. This is a rectangle port head that will fit on an LS1 engine. So it has smaller valves in it that'll fit inside the LS1 bore, but so you get the features of a rectangle port head on an LS1.
Yeah, enough of this nonsense. I say we start throwing this thing together.
I like it.
What do you want to do first, cam?
Yeah, let's get the cam in. Lifters are in, but they're in the raised position so the cam will slip in properly. You just want to make sure, obviously, don't drop it. And the main thing is just slide it in and be as gentle as you can because you don't want to scratch those cam bearings. So just gently slide it in, one lobe at a time. No need to rush here. I always like to put something in the end, like you could use a screwdriver. I'm using a T-handle Allen wrench here, just to give you a little bit more leverage on the front side of it. There we go.
I like this, the timing cover you guys made. So usually on the timing cover on the LS, you have to pull the whole crank pulley off and pull the entire timing cover off. So if you ever have to change out this cam again, whether it's for going to force induction or changing up your setup, this will be really convenient.
Anybody that's put a LS together and has tried to torque down the crank bolt will definitely thank you for that.
So what brought you to the decision on the cam specs?
Well, this cam, it's our biggest LS cam. You guys gave us a hefty goal of horsepower here. So we picked our biggest cam. It's our 2219 camshaft. It's about 631 lift on the intake and exhaust on a 114 lobe separation.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Did you catch all that? Do you understand how this works? If not, let me show you a closer look. This is a camshaft. These are your lobes. This controls how high and how long your valves stay open. So exhaust and intake valves will be open and closed by these lobes, and the shape of it is what determines how high and how long they stay open. This is going to determine the length, and then how long it takes to get there is the duration.
You don't want to pick too big of a cam if you're just putting on stock head, stock intake, because it's really not going to benefit you at all. The high lift isn't going to be good drivability, so you really want to choose the right cam for one, your application, but also what your engine's capable of. You got to look at your intake ports and intake manifold, things like that. So.
My name is Kurt Hooker. I work in the dyno room, in charge of testing here at Edelbrock. Been here for 48 years now.
48 years.
48 years.
All right, I think we got the right guy.
Well, we just want to make sure we get the proper preload here on the lifter. You want to put the piston inside the hydraulic cylinder of the lifter about mid-travel. That's about 130, 140,000 travel. So you want to get at least 60,000 preload in the lifter. That way the piston works in the lifter body and takes up for the wear, the valve, the seat, and everything else, and keeps the lifter quiet. Taking down to 0 last year, there's no, right, so it's hard. We want to end up with like 1 turn of preload. That's too much. This push rod's too long. And what that will do, 2 turns of travel, will hold the valve open. It'll bottom the piston out in the lifter, and will hold the valve open. You'll have no compression.
That old man that was just here, that's actually my old man. So he's been at Edelbrock for about 50 years.
He also speaks as if his like hands are calibrated tools. He's like, oh yeah, it's a 0.25 off. Yeah. What are you doing? You're not even using a tool.
No, he's got like built-in torque wrenches in his forearms. So he you know, he's like the engine whisperer.
So what are we doing right now? He found out that the push rod was too long?
Yeah, the push rod's a little too long. It kind of bottomed, like he said, it bottomed out the piston inside the lifter, so it gave it too much lifter preload. That'll hold the valves open, won't have any compression.
Right.
So he's going to double check. We should have some shorter push rods here. That should be just right for this engine.
When you say the piston inside of the lifter, it's because it's a hydraulic lifter. So if you want to explain a little bit about hydraulic versus like a solid.
Yeah, a solid lifter is pretty much used in racing applications, and it's just pretty much a solid slug of metal is what it is. It'll allow you to rev your engines to however high RPM you'd like to. But hydraulic roll lifter they're a little bit easier on the valve train. For a street car, things like that. You don't have to worry about the cam going flat. Especially a hydraulic roller, which is what this is. Hydraulic lifter, what it does, the oil pressure, oil goes inside the lifter. That's what pumps the lifter up, holds pressure, allowing the lifter to rise up and down, which opens the valve. With it being a hydraulic, it's a lot easier on the valve train, easier on the cam. You don't have to worry about hurting the cam or anything like that.
Cool.
So, but with that, there's a piston inside the lifter that it has to be at the right preload. If there's too much preload, it'll hang the valve open. You won't have any power or compression. So we just have to get the right preload, and then we'll be good to go.
Sweet.
So let me explain a little bit about this build. We have an E36 M3. We're gonna stuff an LS1 into it, and we're gonna try and use as many off-the-shelf parts as we can. If you were to try to do this swap 10 years ago, you would have had to figure out every piece along the way. You'd have to figure out how to build the headers, the motor mounts, the drive shaft, the steering, and it takes a lot of fabrication, a lot of time, and a lot of tools that you may not have. But today you can buy most of these parts off the shelf to do this swap. So here's our plan for the build. We have a Vorschlag swap kit for the LS1, which pretty much takes care of everything you need. It has motor mounts, trans mount, the drive shaft, the headers, a steering shaft, and we also got a fuel pump from them that drops right into the tank. We're gonna talk about suspension, and not just installation, but the setup and alignment it takes to go from drift to grip. We're gonna talk about wiring and ECU solutions to complete the swap, and finally, we're gonna talk about cage design and all the steps needed to keep us safe on track.